Now, the way we communicate with clients, with other people online, the way it all comes through is through conversation. A conversation is a two-way thing. First it goes out and then it comes back in again. And a conversation, when it's just stuck in your head, isn't a conversation. And it won't get worked out unless the words come out and then come back through the other person that's actually there with the conversation. Hey, Robin. Now, the first time I really understood what it's like to be really responsible in a conversation was when I was, a complaint was made against me through the ACCC. So here in Australia, we have the Consumers Commission. So they look after consumers to make sure that what you're saying you do is what you do, and that if anything like an adverse reaction comes up, that gets looked into so that it won't happen again. And what happened for me was that this client came, and she was, you know, the clients that you get a funny feeling about, and you're like, okay, I will try and help them anyway. So she came in and we had a conversation, and I got that funny feeling, and she filled out all the forms, and on there she had mental illness, some schizophrenia, bipolar, some other things. She was on a multitude of those medications. And through the conversation, she just wanted to clear up her skin. I was like, okay, cool, we can do that. And so through, hey Louise, hey Jeanette, hey everybody who's joining us. So through the conversation that we had, I obtained information through the forms that she filled out. We obtained information, and then we came to a plan moving forward with what she would need. And about 3 weeks later, I got a formal complaint letter. And as soon as I got the formal complaint letter, what was going on inside me was, I'm not good enough, I'm wrong, it's all my fault. And even to the point of, what would it look like if I'm not a practitioner anymore? So the reaction that I had was instantaneous, and it was heart-opening, and it was my head just running away with the whole situation. So now, having the beautiful gift of hindsight, it was 2 very, very in-depth weeks of stress, pouring through the notes that I had taken during our consultation, pouring through what I had actually prescribed her, and it ends up, we did, on her form where she went through and told me what medication she had taken, she had admitted Roaccutane as a medication, and I had supplied her with Saccharomyces boulardii with a vitamin A in it. And that vitamin A, whilst taking Roaccutane, is obviously a red flag, and I would have known that had it have been on the form. And that's what came through the process of actually investigating it, which is why the ACCC exists, to find out where the gaps are so that this doesn't happen again. And neither of us was at fault, and then we ended up concluding it. But in the process, what happened was the act that she had been giving me of not taking other medications, and the reaction that I had to that, and then she had a reaction, and I was acting out. So there was a lot of acting and then acting and then acting and reacting. So if we were coming from a space of openly communicating, it would have been a much easier conversation, and there wouldn't have had to be the reaction. But in that moment, I was reacting from all of these parts of me that had been acting like a fraud, that had been acting like lack was my way of being. I had been acting from wanting to be right. So there's all these emotions that come up when conversations are in a reactive mode. So that was probably the first time and the most intense time that I started to understand what reacting is like and what responding or a responsibility, an ability to respond, and that there is a difference. And the beauty of hindsight is now knowing what the outcome was, that we just had to go through a process to find where these, where the loopholes were, or where the gaps in the process was, that I was then able to respond instead of react. And that reaction feeling comes from a feeling in our chest, in our belly, in our, maybe in your throat. There's a reaction that happens. Another time that it came up for me was the first time I had a complaint on my Facebook page when I was doing the naturopathic side of things fairly intensely at my old practice. We had a complaint from a random, so I've got, yes. So I've spoken about it before, that there is a gentleman who has been more of a nuisance in my business over a long time. And we had him being a nuisance on the Facebook page. And again, the same thing came up. There was a moment where he was acting out from a whole bunch of stories and a whole bunch of probably acts that somebody else had acted out with him in his lifetime, when he was younger, when he, may or may not have got attention. He was acting out. And in that moment, I acted out again with the, I'm not good enough. Maybe I am a fraud. Maybe I am. So all of these programs and acting that I had created when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I became an adult and somebody told me that, maybe this isn't the way to go. Someone cut me down and said, oh, you can't do that side of things. You have to do it this way. And so there's this acting a certain way to fit a certain box, and then getting in that moment when you realize you're reacting to that. And in actual fact, if we join on a soul level, and if we join on a heart level, and we communicate nice and clearly and clean up the conversation rather than the acting and then the reaction, there is an amazing opportunity to respond. And again, I was getting caught up in the actions of it. Okay, I need to say this. I need to be the last person in the conversation to say this. And my hubby we sat down. My husband's a wonderful, wonderful coach, and is very level-headed. And we sat down, and in that moment, I was like, no, we need to call the police. This is ridiculous. Reacting. And he said, okay, so if you just step back for a second, how can this be not only a lesson for you, and not only a lesson for him, but in that moment, how can you own the part of the conversation that might actually be up to you? It's like, okay. And we've done a bit of work in some other programs and things around what's your 50%. And this has come up for me with my kids. This has come up for me with my hubby in conversations. This has come up for me in conversations with clients. This has come up in conversations with people that I work with. What is my 50%? If there's a whole 100% in this conversation that we have, so there's 50% here, 50% here, 50% here, 50% here. If we have a whole conversation of 100%, and this is conversations of people putting random stuff on your Facebook page, the bigger you get, there's going to be a percentage of people that are going to find you and they're going to pester you and annoy you. And it's like a badge of honor. Woohoo! I've made it. Somebody, I have reached enough people that a percentage of them are going to have to say, you're not my person. And that's cool. They can just click through, or they can be a pest and get some attention. In that moment, that's their 50%. But what's your 50% to play in that space? And my 50% on that page, when my business nuisance came up, what's my 50%? Actually, the past couple of posts haven't been truly me. So where in that moment was I actually coming from a space of being a bit of a fraud? Where in that moment was I hiding the fact, and this is what spurred it on afterwards, I showed everybody my kids' lunchboxes. And there's things in there that are covered in plastic wrap. And I had an actual vulnerable conversation to get back into alignment without having that fraud stuff building up underneath. And sometimes those things that bubble up underneath are beautifully presented to us through the reaction of somebody else on my Facebook page, the reaction of a client sitting there with a complaint, the reaction of them telling you that those particular herbs don't taste very nice and they'll never take them again. Their reaction can be met with your reaction and nothing will happen. It'll butt heads. Or you can take a moment and instead of reacting to somebody's reaction and having just all this acting happening, if you drop into a space of owning what might be there, and sometimes it's really hard to find, especially when you're in that mode and your throat's a bit funny and your chest's a bit funny and then, how dare they do that to me? Why does he have to show up on my page right now when I'm just about to step out and tell everybody that this amazing thing is happening? Where's the 50%? And so in that moment with the guy that was on my page, I owned that 50%. And my next blog post was specifically about, this is me. Sometimes it appears that I'm a fraud because this is what my kids' lunchboxes look like. Sometimes I don't have the time. Sometimes I don't have the energy. Sometimes, really owning that I have this fraud feeling inside me sometimes, and I can be in that space as well. Therefore, nobody can take that away from me or react to that. I can own it before it even comes up. The other one with the official complaint, the same thing happened. In the middle of it, I was a mess. For 2 days straight, I was crying, wondering if I should give away naturopathy, wondering if I should go back to laboratory work and never have to worry about the public ever again. But then going through the process and hearing some very sound counsel about it, in the letter that I had to respond with, it was specifically stated what to respond, the responsibility that I had, the ability to respond level-headedly and own what I had. I'm owning that our procedure could pertain to not only asking you in this field about the drugs and medication that you have been on, are currently on, and are planning to take ongoingly, but also creating spaces in our standard operating procedures that we double check before we prescribe that are other red flag medications. We specifically ask for red flag medications for each different thing we prescribe. And that became a thing in our standard operating procedure for the way that our practitioners worked. And when I took responsibility for that, the whole thing fell away. Even though there was another 50%, sure. And if I attached to that other 50%, nothing would have changed. I would have just been reacting. And so the big thing that I wanted to invite you guys to, because you are becoming more visible. And when you become more visible, you're not everybody's cup of tea. Thank goodness, because I love tea and I don't want all of the different types of teas. I have 5 or so that I really, really love. And when you aren't somebody's cup of tea and they react, professionally, being able to respond and then bring a different course for the conversation is going to change the way that you can do business. In that moment, the whole thing dissolves when you have an ability to respond rather than show up with your reactions to somebody else's reactions. Does that make sense? Tell me what you're getting out of this conversation to consider. Because these things are going to come up for you. You have an amazing capacity to help people with the knowledge you have in your head, and the ability for you to show up and have a conversation means that at some point somebody's going to come back with the other side of the conversation. And you might not like it sometimes. And the other part of it is, we're in it. Do you have a responsibility? And having a tool like this can save you so much angst and so much pain. And in those moments, I am really lucky because I'm married to somebody who reminds me of these things in these moments, and I get to remind him of these things in the same time. But when I was first starting out and I didn't have that fallback and we didn't have those conversations, I caused myself a lot of angst in those situations. And you guys have the opportunity to help thousands of people, but of those thousands of people, probably about 2% of those people aren't going to be as responsive. They're going to be reactive. And when you react as well, then it's going to cause you a lot more energy drain than it needs to. So, cool. All right, Louise, thank you. I have had one of these clients recently. I'll look at it differently now. Beautiful. Jeanette, it's a pity if someone doesn't agree, they just leave the conversation. Yeah, so they also have their 50%, but it's not up to you to worry about their 50% because you're not responsible for them. You're only responsible for you. And if they don't have the tools to have that responsibility, that's not up to you either. So it doesn't have to be a pity. You can just own your bit, and then whatever happens from there, them doing their thing and all the other stuff, that bit isn't up to you. You don't have any control over the way somebody else is going to react or respond. And they might not just leave the conversation. You might have to take actions like I did to block the person from my page, delete their comment, and put up boundaries around phone numbers in clinic and things like that. That's what we did with the guy that was on my Facebook page. So there's actions as well, but not reactions, not from a space of earnest, from from responsibility. I have a responsibility to my boundaries. I have a responsibility to own my part of it, but I'm not going to own their part of it as well. That's up to them. So yes and no, Jeanette. Okay, Amy, yes, I feel frustrated when I give my 50% to clients and they choose to not change. Yes, this is a gold one when it comes to our clients, right? Here is all of my knowledge. Here's the distillation of possibly 8 years worth of experience and time and accruing information. I've spent $150,000 worth of, my own money on this thing that I am giving you for your version of it with your genetics and your this and your that and your where you are in your life. And then they come back 4 weeks later and they haven't done anything. That bit, that's not up to you. Some people aren't willing to change. Some people aren't ready to hear. My favorite, so I was only talking this weekend about one of my most powerful mentors was actually Rachel Arthur. And she was my clinic supervisor when I was in student clinic. And she was one of the most powerful mentors because she pushed us. And at the time I wasn't too much of a fan, but now I get it. The gold advice that I got from her, that I've heard from other people as well, but it really stood out. It is not up to us to make the seed grow or sprout or do whatever it will do. It is completely up to us. It's our responsibility to plant the seed. Plant the seed, and if we can, influence the environment around it. We can't change the environment around it. We don't have the control over that. Our control is over us and planting the seed. And then have an influence over the environment. We can influence what those people are doing. Our zone of control and our zone of influence. What they can control is when that thing sprouts. If they can control the sprouting and how fast it grows and what it grows into, and we can't do anything about that. If you have planted the seed, you've done your job. It's absolutely not up to us to know when that seed will sprout. So I had a client who first came to me in my first 6 months of practice when I was in somebody else's building. And I explained everything. I went into so much detail, I did so much past history for her, I did everything. And we got her on a detox. 3 days after it, she didn't do anything. And I went into, I felt like I was so invested in the outcome of the, come on, seed, why aren't you sprouting? And then 5 years later, she came back to me and said, I didn't hear from her. She gave up after the 3 days. And then 5 years later, she came back to me and said, all of those things that that we talked about back at that other clinic, and now that you've got this other, now that I'm here in this new space, all of those things, I have had conversations with so many people about those things. The way you describe things, I was then able to teach somebody else. I didn't take it on board for me. I just wasn't ready. But now I want to have a baby. I'm going to do everything you say. There is always a moment that it will sprout, but you might not be present for the sprouting of it. The fact that you dropped the seed in the first place is the most magical thing you could ever do for somebody. But it's absolutely not up to you to be invested in the outcome of what happens to that seed. But sometimes it comes back around and it's just sprouted, and then you're able to influence the environment that seed grows in. So I love that. Amy, then I wonder why they are here. Are they mirroring me? How can I change my approach? Maybe. And it might be just part of their journey. Just like this woman, it might be a part of the journey to be able to go, I'll peek inside the door. Everybody knows about the behavioral change models, and you're in pre-contemplation and then contemplation, and then you get into action mode. You might have learned it at college or uni. And there's the pre-contemplation of, this pamphlet looks nice. I should probably do something about that. I'll talk to everybody else that I'll do some intermittent fasting, blah, 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 blah. Or I'll go vegan, which is what I'm doing at the moment. And then there's contemplation, where you go, actually, yes, this is a really valuable thing. Maybe I should go and see somebody about it. And then there's action. And action's like opening a little creak in the doorway. And you go, oh, should I? Yes. And you walk on through. Or there's action and you go, okay, I'll try those 3 days and then I'll shut the door again. And I'm not ready for that for another 5 years, 10 years, whatever it happens to be. And again, with the mirroring, Amy, beautiful that you brought it up. Where are you doing that? We always have clients that are mirror, in my opinion, and it's not everybody's, and feel free to disagree with me, but I see it as those clients show up doing that because we're doing that somewhere, either in our business, in our family life, with our kids, with our partner, whatever it happens to be. There's something that we were going to take action on and we're not quite ready to do that. We'd rather just sit in our own poo for a little while and, whinge about it and do some other stuff, get sidetracked, do some other thing that we think is way more important, and then take action. So often those people are going to appear when we've got stuff going on as well. Okay, so again, if you, if this conversation is bringing up anything for you, I'd love to hear about it. Tara, I had a Skype consult recently and I knew straight away that I didn't want to work with her. I emailed the treatment plan and didn't hear back. And it turned out she didn't want to work with me either. I felt the feels, but it totally was for the best. Absolutely. And when we are sitting in that reactive mode, we can see the world through this. And if we're sitting in the reactive mode of lack and we're sitting in the action of, well, if she doesn't come back, then what will happen? Oh, if she doesn't come back, no one will come. If she doesn't come back, she'll tell everybody and then no one will come. She doesn't. If we're taking that lens of reaction off, because it meant something to us a long time ago or whatever it happened, then we would go, she doesn't want to come back. She's totally not my person. But there's a lot of people out there who are. So I'm really glad that she might be somebody else's person and I might be able to hand her over, because there's an abundance of practitioners and there's also an abundance of other people who need my help and need my assistance. So the time that I would have spent with her, trying to convince her, coerce her, pretending I knew, she pretends she didn't know, or whatever, all of that time and energy that I would spend on, thank goodness I can actually give that to somebody who wants to treat that way, who is in alignment with her, and somebody else can come in and I can actually help them and assist them and change their life. So I love that. Cool awareness, Tara. Beautiful. All right. Anyone else have anything coming up around that? So that was part one, all about reaction and responsibility through communication and conversation. And where's your 50%? Where's your 50% has been a mainstay for me in all of our conversations, with my teenage kids, with my husband, when I've been in that reactive mode, I can feel it now. It's like a sign or a symptom. I can feel it coming up. I can feel me ing on the inside. And then if something comes out, if I spit it out, probably takes about 15, 20 minutes of me feeling like that. And then I sit back and go, oh, okay, honey, my 50% in that conversation was I was tired. I have this sense of lack because of this conversation that happened earlier on in the day. I feel challenged because I don't feel supported, blah, 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 blah. And that's what came out. What I really wanted to say was blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, you can use it in so many different ways. And I'm just giving you another tool in your tool belt to see if when you become more visible, there is a chance that you don't have to rewrite history of reaction and reaction. Amy, one last thing. For me, I think I need to trust in my treatments and only own my 50%. The awareness of other stuff, with the awareness of other stuff, I will search for if there is a recurring thing. Beautiful. Yeah, excellent.